Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Today, we are finishing up how to clean up your conversations in this part 2. So without further ado, let's hop right in. Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host and executive coach, Adam Melnick. With over a decade of experience in mental health, leadership, and coaching, I aim to help you understand leadership through a mental health lens. So let's sit back, relax, and have a chat. Let's hop right into this one and discuss conversational pruning or thread pruning. In the last episode, we talked about conversational threading, which is the process of moving seamlessly from topic to topic without stopping. It's a seamless flow. Conversational pruning is when you notice the conversational threads and you cut those threads. This is a very important skill to learn and master in leadership. Why? Because when you're doing a lot of rapport building with clients or with your team or with other leaders, there are going to be conversation threads that are going to be put out there that you don't want to go down. The easiest example of this is negativity. Anytime a conversation thread comes out there that's negative, do not go down it. Especially if that is the first conversation you have with that individual. And you're asking yourself, well, why? Why shouldn't I go into the negative? The answer is simple. Because it will hurt you in the long run. Keep in mind, you don't know this other person. By going into the negative, it gives them fuel or ammunition to potentially gossip about you or hurt you in the future. Because you don't know who this individual is, we need to keep the conversation positive. We should only ever go into the negative if we know this individual quite well and this is what they need. Otherwise, we always have to stay in the positive. To emphasize this even more, when we're with a group of individuals, if someone starts going off into the negative and we join them, it will look badly on us. It's just a poor reflection. We are with a group of people and all of a sudden we start talking ill of something or someone, and everyone else around us will naturally start thinking, at least on a subconscious level, hey, this individual likes to gossip. I wonder if they would gossip about me. And they will subconsciously start distancing themselves from you. As a result, we want to make sure not to step in the negative when this is someone new. We only talk about the negative if we know the individual. And we talk about the negative behind closed doors, away from prying eyes. The thing about gossip, and we'll talk about this a little bit later in the podcast episodes, gossip is incredibly destructive. In fact, I would argue it's far more destructive than getting hit, punched, or assaulted. Gossip can destroy your career and livelihood. As a result, we need to protect ourselves from gossip. When someone starts talking negatively, we need to pull them behind closed doors and have a conversation with them. And that's not necessarily berating them, but it is having that conversation, figuring out what's going on with them. When we have the conversations with an individual, if we notice that someone's going negative on us, what we need to do is we need to listen to the topics that are being presented, and we need to ignore the negative statements. An example of this is, I would have gotten so much more work done if my girlfriend hadn't been yelling at me. All she does is just nag. The conversation thread that's being presented to you is that this individual is incredibly busy, that their girlfriend is a nagging individual and is preventing him from doing work. What we need to do is ignore the last two and focus on them being busy. and simply reflect back that busy statement and go down that busy thread, which is, "Oh, I love that you're always so busy. How do you manage it?" We change the course of the conversation and we prune the negative threads. This is incredibly important. We just simply redirect. We don't have to be direct with an individual and say to them very poignantly, "We are not talking about this," unless they push the subject. But typically, if this is someone new or someone we don't really have a relationship with, odds are they won't want to push the issue any further than the initial conversation thread. Be aware when we have conversations with individuals, they will present negative threads to us. We need to trim them and prune them by simply ignoring the thread and focusing on the positive aspect of the conversation. There's that redirection. The next point is agree with people. Agree, 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 agree. Too many times I've listened to leadership be scared of agreeing with somebody. They may listen to a statement and not agree with the full statement, and as a result, will get into a conflict with an individual. The truth of the matter is, if you are listening at a level 2, level 3 listening, then you should be able to pick up the statement that you agree with or the part of the statement that you agree with. And what you need to do is focus in on that statement. Again, we're talking about conversational threading here. We're looking for the thread that we agree with and we pull that thread. We don't have to agree with the whole statement, just the statement that we agree with. Something to always remember is the other party is looking to be understood. You are looking to be understood. This is important to remember. They want you to understand them. And if you start attacking them or contradicting them, guess what? They will feel like you don't understand them, which is going to cause a rift. We don't want that. By simply agreeing with the person, what that does is it says, "Hey, I understand you on some level," and the other person will appreciate that and open up even more. Let's use a political statement of, "I voted for Trump because I'm just not heard at all by my politicians. Nobody in office really gives two shits and they're quite corrupt." While there might be a lot of things in the statement we don't agree with, we pick the ones that we do agree with. Let's pretend to pick one along the lines of, "Yeah, a lot of politicians aren't listening to their consumer base. That's a big problem." We didn't agree with the full statement, but we found something, a common ground, a thread that we could pull on that we can agree with, which is politicians don't listen to their consumer base. And we push down that avenue. We don't sit there and berate them and say, "How could you vote for Trump? Of course he's an idiot." Or, "You're listened to. Why wouldn't you think you're not listened to?" These are all confrontational statements. These statements are going to cause a rift between you and the other party. Again, we want to build a common ground. We want to help them know that they are understood, and we want to understand them. Do not be afraid to agree with somebody. Again, agree is an important skill to learn and master. It tells them that you are listening and you are understanding them. The majority of people you encounter just want to be understood. Find the thread in the conversation you agree with and pull it. This is easier said than done, I know, but you can do it with practice. The next thing to clean up your speech is you need to slow down your speech. Many leaders, many people that do speaking or have conversations like to speed the conversation up. No, this is a terrible, awful idea. Why? Well, when you speed the conversation up, or when they speed the conversation up, you stop thinking about what you are saying and instead start speaking your mind. The faster the conversation moves, the more likely you are to start digging your own grave and agreeing with positions you don't necessarily agree with, or saying things that you don't necessarily mean. This is a very common debate tactic that we see on news channels like Fox or Channel 4 in Great Britain, where the interviewer will try to speed the conversation up to trip up the interviewee into taking a stance that they may not agree with, so that the interviewer can turn them into a straw puppet and poke holes in their argument. Slow down the conversation. If you feel the conversation speeding up, stop responding, take a deep breath, relax, and purposefully slow down. Be more thoughtful when you speak. Take the time to think your answers through. The last thing you need is to say something that you don't necessarily agree with and start pissing people off. Which leads us into the next point. You need to stop being right. Your quest for being right will destroy your career. I just watched an individual publicly humiliate another coworker in a team meeting because this coworker got a stat wrong and then decided to call him out during the meeting to correct him. What do you think is going to happen to that coworker that got publicly humiliated? He's going to harbor that resentment because it was not done in a very tactful way. When we listen to another person speak, if they have said something that is wrong, if they've said something that is just factually incorrect, the first thing you must ask is it important that it needs to be correct? 9 times out of 10, no. It does not matter that the individual was factually wrong. This conversation has no stakes and no bearing on your future or their future. It's just a fact that is wrong. Let it go. Or you may want to just state that it's wrong, but in a much more tactful way. An easy way to do this is if they say, "Oh yeah, did you know that there are actually 3 different types of radio waves? AM, FM, and FM2? This statement is factually wrong." You could simply state, I know I was always taught in school that there was only AM and FM. You leave it out there. You're not saying that they're wrong. You're just saying that this is what you were taught. And you can even add on a little bit of curiosity and simply ask, I was always taught that there was AM and FM. Where did you learn that there were 3 different radio waves? And I'll level with you. Sometimes the other person will admit, hey, I was wrong, you're right. That's incredibly rare. What you're more likely to see is the other person lie through their teeth as a way to protect and preserve their own ego and pride. This is normal. The thing is, They may subconsciously know that they were wrong, but you didn't call them out and you didn't public shame them, which means they're not going to come back and seek vengeance upon you however they might do it. We didn't make a rope salesman, which is phenomenal. But remember, when we are having conversations, we don't necessarily need to be right 100% of the time. We don't need to correct everyone that we see. If we do, we could create enemies. And the more enemies we create, the harder our life is going to be. Let go of this idea that everything needs to be 100% factually right. I have been in many conversations with leadership, with business owners, with high status individuals where they have said something just factually wrong. I do not correct them. I listen to them, I give my statement, and I'll see what they do. And sometimes they just double down on their statement that's just factually wrong, and that's okay. You let it go and you move the conversation on with more conversational threading. The next one is, please be aware of your audience. As you climb the leadership ladder, you will become more out of touch with the frontline staff. The higher you climb, the more out of touch you will become, to the point that you can potentially do some serious damage to your organization and the people you work with. It takes a real conscientious effort to try to stay in touch with the ground level and what's actually going on. When we are talking with individuals, we need to know what our audience is and how to talk to them. Many times I've watched leadership climb the corporate ladder, and when they start climbing that corporate ladder, they have to learn how to speak like a politician. They lose the ability to have a blunt conversation or to be able to just have a regular conversation with their staff. This is unfortunate because this political speech that they're doing, though may cover their ass, creates this huge rift and disconnect between the frontline staff and leadership. We can't be doing this. We need to recognize our audience and how we should speak to them. How I speak to a leader is going to be vastly different than how I speak to a nurse. A nurse wants to be blunt and straightforward. A leader wants me to beat around the bush a little bit. That's also going to be vastly different than how I'm going to speak to my girlfriend and or wife. We need to be aware of our audience, and we need to, again, speak in a way that the other person is going to hear us. Get out of your own head. Think from the other person's perspective. How do they want to be spoken to? And lastly, and I'm going to repeat this. I know I've repeated this in other podcast episodes, but it's important and I need you to hear it. When you say something, ask yourself, what is the point of what I am saying? Your conversation should have meaning. Your statement should have meaning. We need to think about why we are stating what we are stating. We need to make conscious effort to formulate that end goal of where the conversation is even going to go before we open our mouths and speak. Nobody hates more than a leader or an individual that rambles ad nauseum about subjects and topics that nobody cares about. You will have more respect from those around you if you're able to use less words, tighten up your conversation, and always have a point to everything that you say. People will listen. If you just ramble and have no real goal to what you are saying, people tune out. They have to sit there and listen to you because of your position, but they do not care about you. Remember, at this point, you have positional respect, not personal respect. We have to build our personal respect. And one of the ways we do that is by making sure we have a point to what we are saying. Everything we say must be moving somewhere. So with that, we'll end our conversation episode here. To go over or summarize what we talked about, the first one is conversational pruning. Stay away from the negative and keep the conversation in the positive. Ignore conversation threads that we don't want to talk about. Stop being right. It will make you more enemies than followers. State the correct fact in a way that's non-threatening to the individual if you must, and move the conversation on. Again, 9 times out of 10, the fact that was misinterpreted simply isn't important. The next point is make sure you agree with the person. The other individual wants to be heard. When you listen to someone talk, look for the conversation thread that you agree with and pull that thread. Make sure to slow down your speech. When we speed up, we make mistakes. We always want to slow down and articulate our words in a meaningful manner. And lastly, know your audience. Understand how they want to be spoken to and what they need to feel heard. This is important if you would like to connect with your people. With that, we'll end this podcast episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. Next episode, we are talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'll see you then. Cheers. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, give it a like, and share it with a friend. And if you're ready to take the next leap and improve your leadership skills, head over to www.seedingthelead.com and book your free coaching session today.